Part 17. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 161. Shopkeeper Luo is like a cat that sneaks into the kitchen when it smells something. Zhang Yuniang hurriedly said to Zheng Kui'er, "This is the owner and shopkeeper of Deshenglu in the county, Shopkeeper Luo." "Shopkeeper Luo, this is my sister-in-law, Mrs. Zheng." Zhang Yuniang gave Zheng Kui'er another look, put a bowl of both sweet and salty ones. Zheng Kui'er hurriedly filled out 2 bowls of bean curd, poured the toppings on them and brought them to him. Zhang Yuniang took out a small plate of prepared braised dried beans and braised bean paste from the cabinet. Shopkeeper Luo loves to eat and knows how to eat. After getting the bean curd, his whole face was almost buried in the bowl. Lu Xiru was a step late. She rushed over after all the braised food in the shop was sold out. When she entered the kitchen and saw everyone immersed in eating bean curd, she didn't need anyone to greet her, so she shouted, "I want something sweet." Nayunia puffed up her cheeks and silently gave up her position. Shopkeeper Luo ate quickly, even eating 2 bowls, but he finished the dish faster than Niu. "It's delicious, but it's a pity that the tofu pudding is not freshly baked. Has it been reheated for a second time?" Shopkeeper Luo asked tentatively. Zhang Yuniang couldn't help laughing when she heard this, and said, "They say that Shopkeeper Luo loves to eat, and I can see it today." Lu Xiru also put down her chopsticks and said, "The dried tofu sold well in this store today, and the braised bean dip diners also like it." Zhang Yuniang turned to Lu Xiru and explained, "Of the 2 baskets of dried tofu you made, I will sell one to the braised food shop and keep the other basket for Shopkeeper Luo to keep an eye on." Shopkeeper Luo picked up a piece of braised dried tofu from the plate. After tasting it, he said, "The taste is just too strong, but it's a little bit hard to eat. Can you please Madam Gu and make another stir-fry?" Fried dried tofu is a quick dish, and Zhang Yuniang cooked it quickly. Shopkeeper Luo tasted a few pieces and said, "Yes, I bought as much dried tofu as you can get." When Zheng Kui'er got the money for 2 baskets of soy products, she couldn't stop the surprise on her face. She originally thought it would be difficult to do business in the city, but she didn't expect the money to come so quickly. Shopkeeper Luo added, "It's a pity that we don't sell breakfast in our store. Otherwise, we could ask Mrs. Zheng to make a special trip to our store to sell bean curd." After hearing this, Zhang Yuniang asked, "Shopkeeper Luo, what do you think if Mrs. Zheng comes to the city to set up a stall?" Shopkeeper Luo said with a smile, "The relationship is so good, I can't say I have to visit the stall every day." Lu Xiru said with a smile, "Shopkeeper Luo said that, and it's definitely true." Shopkeeper Luo added, "If you make dried tofu well, the tofu should be good as well. You can open a tofu shop in the city and the business will definitely be good." Zheng Kui'er sighed and said, "The rent of shops in the city is expensive, I'm afraid I can't afford it." Lu Xiru suddenly became excited and said, "If you go to the city to open a shop, you don't need a good location. You can just take over the shop where we sell braised meat. The rent is cheap, so you don't have to worry about making money." Zheng Kui'er suddenly moved and looked back at Gu Lao-san. Gu Lao-san was a little hesitant. He had spent his whole life in the countryside and rarely faced such a big decision. Zheng Kui'er could still chat and laugh with Shopkeeper Luo and Lu Xiru. When Gu Lao-san saw a stranger entering the kitchen, he immediately acted like a quail and didn't dare to say a word. Zheng Kui'er had been with her husband for so long and understood his character quite well, so she said, "You capable people have said so, and you are absolutely right. But I can't make the decision on this matter. I still need to discuss it with my family." Lu Xiru didn't force her to agree on the spot. After all, there was a braised food shop with a booming business, so she didn't have to worry about losing her shop. After Niu finished eating her bean curd, the group of people changed places to talk. Gu Lao-san moved closer to Zheng Kui'er and said, "Kui'er, we really want to come to the city to open a shop. Didn't we say that we should try setting up a stall first? Zheng Kuier nodded and said, everyone is willing to help. It would be best if we could open a shop directly. Gu Lao-san, however, was trembling with his hands on his family. Tuier, our family only has this little money. What if we lose it all? Gu Lao-san said. Zheng Kuier frowned and said, let's come to the county again tomorrow. What are you doing here? Gu Lao-san was confused. Zheng Kuier is a person who wants to do whatever she wants, so she said, send the tofu over and give it to Deshenglu. Free gift, Gu Lao-san was reluctant to part with it. Zheng Kuier said, I don't want to let the child go without trapping a wolf. If shopkeeper Luo likes it, let's talk to him again. If there is a restaurant, we can buy our tofu steadily. The money earned will probably be enough to pay the rent of the shop. Then we can sell it in small pieces. The tofu that goes out is pure profit. The more Zheng Kuier thought about it, the more she felt that this business could be done. The more Gu Lao-san thought about it, the more uncertain he became. While Zheng Kuier was washing the dishes, knowing that she would probably help tidy up the kitchen soon and would not leave the kitchen for a while, he quietly walked into the yard and found Gu Lao-san. 2. Mother. Ms. Gu held a handful of chicken food in her hand, stretched her neck and looked into the room, pricking up her ears to hear what was said inside. When she suddenly heard a sound, she was so frightened that she almost dropped all the chaff. Why are you scaring me? Ms. Gu scolded dissatisfiedly. Gu Lao-san promised, Tuier wants to come to the city to open a shop. Ms. Gu was frightened again. Why are we opening a shop so soon? I think so too, it's too fast. Why do you want to reach the sky in one step? Gu Lao-san said pitifully. Old Lady Gu was not as pessimistic as him, and said directly, if it really happens, then your life will be better for the third room. Old Third Gu's eyes lit up and said, Mom, I just want to ask you for an idea. If you say it can be done, we will do it. Old Lady Gu thought of Gu Mingda's evaluation of Zheng Kuier, and said carefully, your wife has her own ideas. Since she thinks so, there should be no problem. You just listen to her in the future. Old Third Gu was stunned when he heard this and said, Mom, do you think we should open a shop in the county? Old Lady Gu, the old lady said, I'm not sure, but I trust your wife. Old Lady Gu was afraid that her son, who had no idea, would make a mistake, so she said earnestly, Old Third, although your wife is a stepmother, we have seen how she treats the two children. In the past 6 months, Xiao and Xiaobao have grown stronger and more cheerful than before. This is all thanks to your wife. You should be grateful. Old Third Gu nodded and said, I know everything. Because Nyunio likes Zheng Kuier, the old lady's 5 points of trust in Zheng Kuier has now become 10 points. The old lady still remembers that the people that Nanan liked in the past were all first-class good people. Since Nyunio is the reincarnation of Nanan, their vision should be the same. Gu Xiaobao and Gu Xiao rushed out of the kitchen playing and fighting. To make life easier for the third wife, Old Lady Gu took the 2 children and told them, as she had done countless times before, your stepmother is very good to you. You must be filial to her in the future. When she has children in the future, you must help take care of them, understand? First update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 162. Gu Xiao nodded vigorously and said, I know, Nai, you've said it many times. Ms. Gu was still worried and asked, you remember it so clearly, so what else did I say? Gu Xiao shook her head and said, you also said that the stepmother is not the kind of person who treats us badly after having a biological child. We must be filial to her and treat her as our own mother, so that we can be sincere to her. Ms. Gu felt relieved about Xiao and turned to look at Xiaobao. Gu Xiaobao was only 4 years old, and his mind was not as clear as his sister's. He only remembered, stepmother, stepmother, stepmother will not take my candy back to her parents' house. Mrs. Gu turned to Gu Laosan and said, the children all know that the stepmother is a good person, but you still think about it? Since you want to do business, what can you do if you don't have money? You spend all the money at home. Leave it to Kuier so she won't shrink back. Zheng Kuier had just finished cleaning up the kitchen and walked into the yard when she heard these words. Mrs. Gu pulled Gu Laosan tightly to take out the money bag from her body and stuffed it into her daughter-in-law's hand. Mrs. Gu held Zheng Kuier's hand and said, this is ridiculous. My idiot son will be completely controlled by you from now on. Mrs. Gu was about to follow Gu Mingda to Beijing. Seeing that life in the third house was getting better, she was relieved in her heart. Conversations in the house also happened very quickly. Regarding their unwillingness to sell Fangzi, shopkeeper Luo expressed his understanding and said, don't worry, the family has already discussed it. Let me take care of the braised food business. I will never cheat you. Shopkeeper Luo is a direct descendant of the Luo family, and opening Desheng building is also one of the tests for him in the family. Desheng restaurant's business exploded in just 1 year, becoming one of the best restaurants in Guang'an County. Compared with the difficulty of getting a table at Deshenglu, the Chunfenglu located across the street is no longer as good as Spring Breeze. Since the incident of feeding sour braised food to diners, Chunfeng Tower has lost a lot of money, and its business has plummeted. With a bad reputation, it is difficult to do business. Now Chen He is running around the world trying to sell Chunfeng Tower. After shopkeeper Luo passed the test in Desheng building, his family gave him more money and allowed him to open braised food business everywhere with the support of the Luo family tree. We are naturally very relieved when shopkeeper Luo is doing things, Lu Ziru said with a smile. The share ratio has been decided long ago, the deed has been signed, and various details are still being discussed. Although Niu Niu fell asleep after listening to it, she still tried to hold up her eyelids. Zhang Yuniang held her in her arms, took out a handkerchief and wiped the corners of her mouth. Be good, go to sleep if you want, Zhang Yuniang said softly. Niu Niu closed her eyes, leaned her neck and fell asleep at the speed of light. Seeing her like this, the adults present all smiled heartily, and then lowered their voices in a tacit understanding. Shopkeeper Luo took out 2 house deeds. One place to open a braised food workshop, and one place for you to rest in the capital. Shopkeeper Luo seemed to have expected what they would say, and said, both of these 2 houses were bought last year. The price of houses in Beijing has not changed much in the past few years. You can live here first. If you like it, I will sell it to you at the original price. If you don't like it, just pay me the rent according to the current price in the capital, as long as you don't blame me for buying and selling by force. Shopkeeper Luo had considered every aspect, making it impossible for the Gu family to refuse. He directly gave the house deed and keys to the Gu family. This trust was also touching. After all the details were discussed, shopkeeper Luo stood up and was about to leave. Niu suddenly shouted in her sleep, money. So much money. Shopkeeper Luo looked at Niu lying in Zhang Yuniang's arms and said with a smile, according to Niu's good advice, if we open a braised meat shop in the capital, we will definitely have a prosperous business. After Niu yelled these words in her sleep, she smacked her chin and fell asleep again. Zhang Yuniang gently put the child back on the bed, then stood up and checked Niu's luggage together with Gu Mingda. Bring more money, if you don't have enough money, go buy it, Gu Mingda said. Zhang Yuniang looked at the bulging purse, which could no longer hold any more, and said, there are 100 taels of silver and banknotes. They will join us in half a month at most. This much money is enough. But the old father couldn't help but worry and said, are you ready for the reward? The servants in the big house are the most contemptuous of others. What if one of the servants neglects her because the reward is less? Zhang Yuniang looked at him speechlessly and said, "Her godfather is as worried as you are and will not let her be neglected by the servants. Just keep your heart in your stomach." Gu Mingde was still worried and muttered, "There are always those servants who are short-sighted. Maybe they despise her because she is not her biological child? My dear baby is still so young. Being neglected once will definitely leave a psychological shadow." Zhang Yuniang never knew that her husband still had the potential to be a Tang monk. His casual thoughts sounded like hundreds of flies buzzing around his ears. "Why are you so worried? You can only be relieved if Niuniu is not gone," Zhang Yuniang said angrily. Gu Mingde immediately slapped his thigh and said, "Okay, I'll write a letter now and have someone take it over tomorrow. Niuniu has something to do at home, so I won't go. The servants of the Sun family have been waiting here for several days, and they don't talk about keeping their promises anymore," Zhang Yuniang reminded. Gu Mingde sighed and said, "It's a pity that Guobao is a good boy. He knows that he keeps his word at such a young age." The couple looked at Niuniu's bag again and again, and they felt that this was useful and that was indispensable. They were afraid that their daughter would be inconvenient if she lacked something, so they packed another bag. The next morning, before dawn, the whole family had already gotten up and started to work. "I really don't understand why you like to eat ginger. This year, Grandma made all the ginger grown in the yard into ginger cakes. You can take them and eat them slowly on the road." Old Mrs. Gu put a large bag of ginger cakes with a strong smell on the carriage. Niuniu put her face against the old lady's face and said crisply, "Grandma is the best. Niuniu likes to eat the ginger cakes made by Grandma the most." Zhang Yuniang stuffed the water bag into the carriage again. "I boiled some water in the morning and added some brown sugar to it. Drink it when you are thirsty. Remember?" Niuniu nodded vigorously. Father Gu wrapped up a pile of wood carvings and stuffed them into Niuniu's hands. "Grandpa, I've carved them, my dear, I like them." The pile of wood carvings was a complete set, and they were carved of the Gu family. The carvings were very lifelike, and you could see the expressions on everyone's faces. Father Gu was very thoughtful. Each person's wood carving was stuck on the tray below, making it easy to place. "Grandpa is so awesome." Niuniu's eyes lit up amazingly, and she said, "I'm not afraid of anything when I go out with my whole family." Second update. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 163. Even though the Gu family was reluctant to part with it, the carriage slowly disappeared at the end of the road. Everything that needs to be taken care of has been taken care of. Those two nuns seem to be upright people and will not bully the good boy. Zhang Yuniang softly comforted Gu Mingde, who looked uncomfortable. Gu Mingde shook his head, without any relief, but said, "How can she get married in the future? Watching the child leave with others, I feel like a piece of my heart has been dug out, and I feel empty. Otherwise, let's keep an eye on the child now to see whose child is suitable, and we can raise him at home as a son-in-law, so that he won't leave us." Zhang Yuniang looked at her husband, who had always been calm, and suddenly became worried about gains and losses. She felt helpless, but she still comforted him softly. Just pressing the gourd to lift the gourd, Gu Mingde coaxed her away, and Lu Xiru started crying again. "It's such a far-away place, and the place is unfamiliar. She's so young, would she secretly hide in bed and cry when she was bullied?" Lu Xiru just imagined that scene and started to cry. She started to cry, and Mrs. Gu felt uncomfortable. Even Dad Gu said vaguely, "Bao, chasing treasure." Gu Mingde turned his head, as if he couldn't bear it anymore, and said to Zhang Yuniang, "Let's pack up the house quickly and try to leave early." Seeing him like this, Zhang Yuniang said helplessly, "What's the use of hurrying up? When traveling far away, we always have to wait for the caravan to come together. The most important thing is when the caravan sets off. Gu Mingdan nodded, "You're right, I'll go to the trading house and ask if I can urge you to leave early." Niu Niu sat obediently in the carriage. When she was hungry, she would take out the ginger cakes and chew them slowly. When she was thirsty, she would find water by herself. She would also ask the two nuns who were in the carriage if they wanted to eat. The Gu family is afraid that grandma will bully the children, but they don't know that grandma is also afraid that the children will become demon kings. Grandma Wang felt relieved in her heart when she saw that Niu had been calm and peaceful. The carriage traveled on the road for several days and entered Nanlin County. The Sun family now has 3 people living together. The eldest man's mother, Ms. Feng, is the most respected person in the house. The big house has few heirs, and the second house has luxuriant branches and 4 young masters. The third house just gave birth to twin girls 2 years ago. Grandma Wang was afraid that Niu would offend someone, so she added an extra point. The second wife, Ms. Feng, is the old lady's niece. Niu nodded vigorously to show that she remembered. The carriage walked along the street into a spacious street. There are a row of shops on both sides of the street, and there are so many people coming and going, making it very lively. Grandma Wang proudly introduced, "The shops on the street on the left are all the property of the Sun family." Niu opened her eyes slightly when she heard this and said, "Daddy Sun's house has many houses." Grandma Wang said with a smile, "When you enter the house, you will really appreciate how many houses there are." The carriage walked in the city for a long time, and the surrounding area gradually became quiet, and finally stopped in front of a mansion with a vermilion door. Sun Jiaxing had been looking forward to Niu's arrival all morning, so he sent people to wait at the city gate every day. As soon as he saw the carriage entering the city, someone would immediately go back to report the news. He simply informed the whole family to wait in the front hall, and even went to the gate to pick them up in person, for fear that the child would be neglected by the concierge. "It's true, eldest brother, a goddaughter from Weibalu Road, also asked us to come and see him. I don't know if he has come to visit me in such a shabby settlement." Xiao Feng sat on a chair in the front hall and lowered his voice dissatisfied. He complained to his sister-in-law. Ms. Shen, the wife of the third wife, nodded when she heard this and said, "I don't care about my biological niece, but I treat other people's daughters as treasures. I really don't know what eldest brother thinks." A dignified gentleman who came second in the rankings ran to the gate to greet a little girl. "He has no dignity at all," Xiao Feng said sourly. Ms. Shen nodded vigorously, "Yes, when my husband-in-law comes home, the eldest brother is always indifferent. He is not as good as an adopted daughter, but the treasure must be treated like something else." No matter how upset the two people were behind their backs, Sun Jiaxing stood at the gate, tiptoeing and looking out. When he saw the carriage appear, he immediately trotted over. Grandma Wang was the first to get off the carriage. She originally wanted to help Niu get out of the carriage, but when she turned around, she saw that Sun Jiaxing had opened his hands and was waiting to hold the child, so she stepped aside silently, mentally raising her favor level even higher. "Carry." Niu opened the curtain of the carriage and came out. The moment she saw Sun Jiaxing, her eyes lit up. "Daddy Sun." She jumped directly from the carriage into Sun Jiaxing's arms. After Sun Jiaxing hugged her, he immediately cried out like a darling. "Are you tired from the journey? Did you eat well? Are these two women serving you attentively?" Sun Jiaxing asked questions like a barrage of questions. Grandma Wang's heart suddenly rose to her throat, fearing that her child would say something bad about her. Fortunately, Niu is not the kind of duplicitous child. "Everything is fine. I stayed at an inn on the way, and Grandma Wang even made me bunny cakes, which were delicious," Niu said with a smile. Sun Jiaxing glanced at Grandma Wang approvingly, and then said, "If you like her, Let her serve you from now on. Grandma Wang immediately looked at Niu Niu expectantly. She didn't have an important position in the Sun family's house. Although Niu Niu was not a direct relative of the Sun family, depending on how much Sun Jiaxing valued her, she might be more comfortable with Niu Niu than with the two serious ladies from the third room. Okay, Niu Niu said with a smile. With a smile on her face, Grandma Wang said, young lady likes this old lady, I will be very considerate of my wife and serve you comfortably. Sun Jiaxing was also satisfied. He carried Niu Niu into the house through the front door and said, your mother and your brother have been waiting for a long time. Your room has been packed up. You live in the same courtyard as us. If you need anything, just let us know, just know. Niu Niu was stunned for a moment when she heard this, and then she realized that the your mother here was her godmother Li. Sun Jiaxing carried her daughter into the front hall, and Mrs. Li stood up and said excitedly, Niu Niu, I haven't seen you for a year. You are almost a big girl and you are beautiful again. Niu Niu was also very happy to see Mrs. Li. She had liked this gentle aunt in the past. Godmother, Niu Niu shouted crisply. Mrs. Li responded, and then took out the greeting gift that she had prepared early. What she gave as a gift was a golden lock of longevity. Hanging it around her neck, Niu Niu felt it was heavy. I heard from your father that you don't have a longevity lock yet. I specially asked someone to get it, and also asked a senior monk to consecrate it. It will definitely protect our Niu Niu's health and longevity. Niu Niu was stunned for a while before she realized that your father refers to Sun Jiaxing. Godmother, I also wear a golden rabbit given by Aunt Lu around my neck. I wear a lot of things, and my neck is so heavy that it will be crushed. Niu Niu raised her neck and said. First update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 164. Li Shi said with a smile, it's better to be heavy and bearable. You are still young. If you can't wear it, just put it away first. You can wear it again when you are older. Anyway, after all, Li didn't listen to Niu Niu's refusal at all. Sun Jiaxing and his wife took Niu Niu to see the two sisters-in-law sitting opposite. This is Niu Niu, she's so cute, Xiao Feng praised with a smile. Her enthusiasm was completely invisible, as she had been talking behind her back before. This is your second aunt and third aunt. Mrs. Li taught Niu Niu how to call people. Niu Niu cleverly called people. The couple waited for a moment. Li's brows couldn't help but frown, and Sun Jiaxing's face didn't look good either. Sun Jiaxing specially called the people over. They regarded Niu Niu as their own daughter, so they also hoped that the second and third bedrooms would also behave like a serious niece. Nowadays, these two people don't seem to want to give a greeting gift at all, so the couple is naturally unhappy. After all, they have never treated their nieces and nephews poorly, and there is no reason for their daughter to be treated so coldly. Sun Jiaxing couldn't do anything to ask for a meeting gift from his sister-in-law, so he could only ask, where are the second and third children? I asked someone to call her a long time ago, why is there still no one there yet? Little Feng said, brother, my husband said he has a headache. Sun Jiaxing suddenly darkened his face and said, my second son was still alive and kicking when I saw him this morning, and now he's sick. Little Feng didn't dare to tell the truth, so she could only say, the weather has been bad these days, and my mother doesn't feel well either. Sun Jiaxing said, since he compares himself with his mother in everything, do you want me to take care of him? Xiao Feng suddenly didn't dare to speak. Sun Jiaxing looked at his third sister-in-law again. Shen quickly replied, brother, my husband is out visiting friends. Sun Jiaxing sneered, you don't go out in the morning and you don't go out in the evening. My daughter has to go out as soon as she comes back. He spends all his time entertaining cats and dogs. How can he have any serious friends? Because her husband was reprimanded by her eldest brother, both sisters felt that it was hard to live up to their reputation. However, now only one person in the entire Sun family, Sun Jiaxing, had won the Jinchi. Not to mention here, even in the clan, everyone supported him. Sun Jiaxing was still the eldest son, and his eldest brother was like his father. No matter how fierce the scolding was, the two of them could only listen respectfully. Go back and tell the second and third sons that if you really have a problem with me, just say it openly and don't do these little tricks behind my back. After Sun Jiaxing finished speaking, he angrily hugged Niu Niu and walked to the backyard. Niu Niu comforted her in a low voice, "Daddy son, are you unhappy because your second uncle and third uncle didn't come?" Sun Jiaxing felt chilled. Over the years, the brothers had often caused trouble outside, and he had often followed behind to clean up the situation. Now he just felt that all the years of care he had given them had gone to waste. Sun Jiaxing nodded and said, "Although you are the junior and they are the elders, I have repeatedly warned them before and they have promised well, but to give up the choice temporarily is really too much. Rather than being a good kid, I followed Sun Jiaxing's words and said that I was a junior and didn't necessarily have to ask them to come to meet me." Niu Niu felt even more distressed that Sun Jiaxing's efforts were fruitless. "Daddy son, they are too much, they are bad. We are not good to them," Niu Niu said indignantly. When Sun Jiaxing saw Niu Niu waving her little fists with anger written on her face, her mood suddenly became less bad. With Niu Niu accompanying Dad doesn't feel uncomfortable at all. "Niu Niu is right, we are not good with them," Sun Jiaxing said. Seeing that he was happy, Niu Niu also became happy and said, "Dad, I haven't met Xiao Changshao yet. Don't think about the people who make you unhappy. We have to think more about happy things." Sun Jiaxing was also happy when he mentioned his son and said, yes, my dear, you are right. Your brother can blow bubbles now and is very cute." Niu Niu suddenly looked forward to it. Mrs. Li looked at the father and daughter from the side. She had been tired of causing trouble to her husband in the second and third bedrooms for a long time. After such a fuss today, she just hoped that her husband would wake up a little bit. As soon as they entered the main courtyard, the three of them heard the sound of a child crying loudly. Li, the mother-in-law, immediately rushed in after hearing the voice. "I was fine when I came out. Why am I crying again? Am I hungry?" Ms. Li asked in confusion. The wet nurse was also aggrieved. "Madam, I just fed him a quarter of an hour ago, so he shouldn't be hungry. He just didn't eat, he just cried. This has never happened before." The 2-month-old child was howling at the top of his lungs with his eyes closed, which made everyone's heart break. Another maid, Pearl, who was responsible for taking care of the child, whispered, "The young master has always been good-tempered. It's not that he doesn't cry when he's hungry. Today he cried for no reason, as if he was shocked by something." No one present realized anything was wrong. Pearl continued, "The young master started crying half a quarter of an hour ago. If you think about it carefully, did someone come to the house at that time?" "Pearl," Li suddenly shouted loudly. Pearl shrank her neck and said, "Madam, I am doing this for the sake of the young master. I must have been harmed by some unlucky thing or person." Niu Niu had no idea that the person Pearl was referring to was herself. She took 2 steps forward and walked to the wet nurse. She looked at the crying little Changshao with distress, raised her hand and held Changshao's exposed little hand. "The moon is quiet, the river is quiet, my little baby is sleeping." Niu Niu hummed softly as Zhang Yunian coaxed her to sing. The child's crying gradually stopped. The whole room fell silent. Pearl's eyes widened. She didn't expect to be coaxed by Niu Niu so easily. The baby in the nurse's swaddling clothes not only stopped crying, but also moved his eyes around, as if trying to find the source of the sound. The nurse bent down and let the baby's face Niu Niu. The white and tender ball, after finding Niu Niu's direction, opened its mouth and gave Niu Niu a toothless smile. Niu Niu tilted her head, stared at Chang Xiao with bright eyes, and said happily, "My brother knows that I am the elder sister." Li and Sun Jiaxing also looked at the scene with smiles. "He doesn't smile at me much, but he smiles when he sees you, which shows that you are destined to be siblings," Li said gently. Niu Niu patted her chest and said, "My brothers all say that I am a good sister. I will learn to be a good sister in the future. If there is something delicious, I will share it with you, okay?" Little Chang Xiao seemed to understand, and actually responded to his sister with a giggle laugh. He can laugh out loud. He never laughed out loud before, Sun Jiaxing said excitedly. The couple, who were raising a child for the first time, paid close attention to every little move of the child, and even a sneeze could make them cheer. Niu was suddenly startled, pointed at a small red dot on Chang Xiao's wrist, and asked, "What is this?" The second update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 165. When Mrs. Li heard this, she quickly picked up the child. She had been married for several years before having this child. Mrs. Li is more precious than anyone else. She squeezed her son's hand, frowned and asked the nanny, "Where did the little red dot come from? It looks like it was pricked by a needle." When the wet nurse saw the little red dot, she felt very strange and said, "Madam, I really don't know. When I gave the young master a bath yesterday afternoon, there was no such red dot." Sun Jiaxing observed the red dot carefully and said, "It looks like it was pricked by a needle, and it seems like it was just pricked." When Mrs. Li heard this, she was so angry that her eyes turned red. "Who did it? How brave!" Niu Niu suddenly stretched out her hand and grabbed Li's sleeve, comforting her with a sweet voice, "Don't be anxious, godmother. My mother said that when you are anxious, it is easy to make mistakes, and it is easy for bad people to succeed." Mrs. Li nodded and said, "Okay, godmother, don't worry, godmother must find the person who harms longevity." Perhaps the little girl's comfort had an effect, but Ms. Li actually calmed down, and her eyes fell on several people present. There are four main people responsible for taking care of longevity: a wet nurse, an old nanny, and two maids. The old grandma took leave yesterday and is not in the house today, so it is natural to rule it out first. Among the two maids, Coral was relatively marginalized. At this time, she also took the initiative and said, "Madam, I didn't touch the young master today. It's definitely not me." The only suspects left on the list are wet nurse and Pearl. Naturally, the nanny wouldn't admit it, and just said, "I was fine when I was holding the young master. I had a stomachache earlier, and when I turned around I saw the young master crying." Pearl, nanny hugs the young master more often. The young master started crying in the wet nurse's hands. "It wasn't me." Before Sun Jiaxing and his wife had time to speak, they watched the two people tug at each other. The wet nurse took the young master's gold collar. "She is not a good person," Pearl shouted. Not to be outdone, the nanny said, "You also took the young master's gold and silver gifts." Pearl shouted again, "I saw the wet nurse and the second wife talking by the rockery the day before yesterday. Did the second wife instruct you to do this? The second wife only wanted the eldest man to adopt the fourth young master. She must have wanted you to harm the young master." When the wet nurse heard this and saw everyone present turning their attention to her, she hurriedly said, "The second wife just asked me who made the young master's belly band and said that the stitching was very fine. She didn't instruct me to do this thing. It's you. I saw you talking to Tortoise Shell next to the third wife from a distance yesterday. Tortoise Shell seemed to have given you something. Maybe the third wife asked you to do this. After all, the third wife also wanted to adopt her little daughter." "Sir." Sun Jiaxing frowned and shouted, Asshole. The wet nurse and Pearl fell to their knees on the ground with a plop, their bodies shaking like chaff. As soon as Niu entered the house, these two people revealed all the secret plans of the other two houses of the Sun family. The second house wanted to give the eldest house a son, and the third house wanted to give the eldest house a daughter. Sun Jiaxing sneered at this time and said, "They are actually more worried than me about whether I can have both children and a daughter." Mrs. Li's tears fell, and she said with a guilty look on her face, "Ms. Sir, I didn't realize that I allowed such a person to appear around Changshao." Sun Jiaxing blames his wife in his heart. After all, his wife should take care of the inner house. At this time, Niu whispered, "Godmother, you have just given birth to a baby, so you can't cry." Mrs. Li felt sour in her heart. Her biological son was stabbed with an acupuncture somewhere she couldn't see, and her guilt almost overflowed. Niu also patted her hand and said, "Godmother, you are already very tired from taking care of the baby. You can't blame yourself anymore." Mrs. Li looked at the obedient and soft little girl, and suddenly understood why Gu Mingda and his wife held her in their hands and doted on her. Who wouldn't love such a sensible and considerate little sweet pea? Sun Jiaxing also changed from blaming to feeling guilty, and said, "You are weak and this is not the time to worry about these things. It is because they are too obsessed with it that they take advantage of it." After Sun Jiaxing helped his wife sit down beside him, he turned his head and looked at the two people kneeling on the ground with cold eyes. "If you confess now, you don't have to suffer severe punishment. Who asked you to get the needle?" After Pearl and the nanny looked at each other, they still pointed at each other, "It's her, not me. Please be aware of this." Sun Jiaxing was no longer polite and called the commander in with a wave of his hand, "Send these two to the yamen. They will be punished." When the wet nurse heard this, she cried very sadly, "Master, I am not a servant in your house, I am a good citizen. I really did not give the young master an acupuncture. The second wife did come to see me, but I didn't agree. I am a good nanny to the young master. As long as I take good care of the young master, I can live a good life. Why should I take risks to do things for the second wife?" Pearl also said at the side, "Master, if you really send us to the yamen, we can't hide this matter. I'm afraid that other people will know about the scandal in the inner house, and our Sun family will become a joke in the city." Sun Jiaxing said, "Am I not a joke now? Pearl, not only will you be tortured today, but I will also sell all your family members to the mines. In a place like a mine, human life is not taken seriously at all. You may be tortured to death within half a year." When Pearl heard this, she didn't hesitate anymore and cried, "Master, I'll recruit. I'll recruit them all." It was indeed Tortoise Shell who found me. She wanted me to torment the young master and put the blame on Miss Gu. In this way, you and your wife he will be disgusted with Miss Gu and consider adopting his third wife's daughter. Sir, I am short-sighted. Please take my parents' hard work for so many years into account and please don't involve my family." Sun Jiaxing looked at Chang Sui on the side, first ransacked the house and find out all the things she took from the young master. Then the whole family was dragged out and sold together. Pearl suddenly turned pale. The only good news was that she would not be sold to the mines, but she would not let others go like this. Why was she the only one unlucky? I learned this trick from my nanny. When the young master couldn't stop crying, the nanny would prick his acupuncture points and knock him out, Pearl said. The most important reason why the current nanny can get this job is that she said she has some medical skills and can better take care of longevity. But I didn't expect that this advantage would one day turn into a sharp knife that stabs people. Coral is not a good thing. Last time I saw her secretly pinching the young master. Her mother was doing things in the second wife's yard, maybe she was instructed by the second wife. As the pearls were biting, almost all the people serving Xiao Changshao were wiped out except the old nanny. The deeper Sun Jiaxing went into the interrogation, the colder his back became. Among these three wrong people, the nanny is greedy for money, and Pearl works for the third room. Neither of these two will cost her a long life. Only Coral, she came here to kill her, but thanks to Coral being a marginal person, she had not yet made up her mind to take action. In the end, Pearl and her family were sold together, and Coral's family was sent directly to the mine. The wet nurse was a good citizen, and all the things she stole were returned, and she was kicked out by the Sun family. Her reputation was ruined, and there would be no one to work in the future. Dare to invite her. Sun Jiaxing looked tired. He looked at Mr. Li and asked softly, "Am I a bad brother? Why do they want to attack Chang Xiao? He is so young." First update. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 166. Ms. Li had never seen her husband look so decadent. When the couple failed to seek a child in those years, the husband was not as frustrated as he is now. Although Ms. Li was angry with the second brother and the third brother, seeing her husband acting like this, she still went to comfort her and said, it had to be the second brother and the third brother's idea. Sun Jiaxing interrupted with a wry smile and said, husband and wife are one, even if it is the sister-in-law's idea, they must have this idea too. I have mentioned Niuniu's matter to them many times, but they can still put it behind them. They don't have a problem with Niu, they have a problem with me. If I dig my heart out and they still have an opinion, then why should I continue to care about them? Sun Jiaxing was like a man who had finally glimpsed the light of day after clearing away the heavy fog. He felt as if the burden on his shoulders had been relieved in an instant. This time when I go to Beijing, I will only bring my mother with me. Sun Jiaxing completely gave up on his original intention of bringing the other two families with him to Beijing. Ms. Sir, you said you brought them to Beijing earlier because you were afraid that they would cause uncontrollable trouble in their hometown. If you leave them here and cause trouble, what will happen? Ms. Li was worried. Sun Jiaxing had already made up his mind and said, I will invite the clan leader to have a drink in a few days, and then I will take care of all these things. Although the three families of the Sun family now live together, Mr. Sun has always thought deeply and forced the family to be divided when he was dying. Now it is easy to separate. After Sun Jiaxing and Ms. Li had discussed the matter, they turned around and saw Chang Xiao gradually falling asleep under Niu's gentle patting. Niu yawned, grabbed her brother's hand and lay down beside him to fall asleep. Li looked at the two children lying side by side with gentle eyes. Chang Xiao really likes my sister. Seeing the two children sleeping sweetly, Sun Jiaxing felt that all the gloom in his heart had been swept away and said, it would be great if Niu stayed at our house. Li's eyes lit up and asked, is it okay? Sun Jiaxing shook his head. I asked, but brother Gu didn't give it. Ms. Li also felt sad, it's such a pity. Sun Jiaxing echoed, there are so many children in the Gu family. What's wrong with giving Niu to me? Brother Gu is too stingy. Niu, who was lying on the bed, suddenly turned over. She was so frightened that the couple did not dare to say anything bad and quietly backed out. Ms. Li left her eldest daughter in the room to take care of the two children. After a long time of tossing, the big house was in a state of panic. Everything that needed to be dealt with was dealt with, and Xiao Changshao could not leave anyone around. Originally, I planned to let Niu choose two maids in the afternoon, but now I have chosen them together with the longevity one. Ms. Li explained. Sun Jiaxing said, everyone around Changshao is like a sieve. We must be careful when selecting people this time. Ms. Li sighed and said, it's easy to find a maid to serve you. It's just a wet nurse. I'm afraid that I'm used to her milk for a long time. If I switch to someone else's milk, there will be trouble. As if she was afraid of something happening, as soon as Li finished speaking, Chang Xiao in the room suddenly woke up from his sleep and started crying. The couple rushed into the back room. Okay, Chang Xiao, don't cry, my sister is still sleeping, Ms. Li coaxed softly. But no matter how she coaxed her, Chang Xiao was still crying loudly. Even if she took the child outside, Niu was still woken up by the crying. Niu rubbed her eyes, jumped off the bed, ran out with her shoes dangling, and grabbed Chang Xiao's waving little hand. Chang Xiao is good, don't cry, Niu coaxed softly. Li's child couldn't be coaxed for a long time. Niu coaxed her a few words and Chang Xiao calmed down. Mrs. Li said with a smile, it turns out that our little Chang Xiao is not having nightmares, but missing his sister. Niu sighed like an adult and said, it's my fault. She rolled to the side when she fell asleep. I shouldn't have let go of Chang Xiao's hand. Li said, Niu is still young, how can she always sleep in the same position? Now that both children were awake, Li simply asked her servants to bring the maids and wet nurses into the courtyard. Longevity will soon require milk, so the wet nurse is chosen first. The time to find someone was short, so the servants traveled all over the county and only brought 3 lactating women. Mrs. Li asked the 3 of them to take turns feeding little Chang Xiao. The eyes of such a big child can only see blurry outlines. Chang Xiao now distinguishes people by their breath. He was keenly aware that these 3 people were not the original nannies. He tilted his head and resisted. Mrs. Li immediately asked her servants, are there any other wet nurses? Are they just these 3? The servants' eyes hesitated. If you have something to say, tell me quickly. Why are you hiding it at this time? Ms. Li urged. The servant replied, there is also Mrs. He, but her man has just left, and her daughter can't be without someone. Mrs. Li remembers this person. The first time she chose a nanny for Chang Xiao, she was originally very satisfied, but because she had lost her husband, she was afraid of bad luck, so she didn't choose this person. Forget it, call her over and give it a try. Mr. Li was now in a critical condition and sought medical treatment. Ms. He arrived very quickly, and Ms. Li's heart skipped a beat when she saw her. She saw Ms. He 3 months ago, and she was not as haggard as she is now. When Ms. He arrived, she held a 4-month-old baby girl in her arms. She handed her daughter over to someone else to hold, took the longevity hand gently, and hummed a ballad in a low voice. Chang Xiao started to make a fuss when he didn't catch Niu, but gradually calmed down in the song of He Niangzi, and hope suddenly burst out in He Niangzi's eyes. But the next second, no matter how she coaxed, little Chang Xiao refused to drink her milk. He Niangzi's eyes suddenly became desperate again. Li was also very disappointed, and said to the nanny beside her, look for it again, today we must find a wet nurse who can let Chang Xiao drink milk. He Niangzi stood there in a daze, but did not take her daughter over immediately. She thought that this was it, there was no way out. She looked at her daughter who was held in someone else's arms at this time, her little face was white and tender, and she looked so well behaved. Do you really want to take your daughter to the river together? The child is obviously so young, and this is also the only flesh and blood of your husband. But if you don't jump into the river, where is her way out? Niu seemed to sense something. She suddenly turned to Li and said, Godmother, why don't you let this ant try again? Chang Xiao seems to like her very much. Li was stunned when she heard this. Although she felt that there was no need to try again, since her daughter had said so, she would not refuse the child's small request. Ms. He did not expect that there would be a sudden turn of events. She was so surprised that her hands were shaking. She carefully took Chang Xiao and held him in her arms. Her voice was countless times softer than before. After Chang Xiao's slightly frowned brows slowly relaxed, Ms. He began to feed him. It was a pity that Chang Xiao still didn't eat. Naiyuniu sighed and said, Chang Xiao is a good child. Good children should eat well, otherwise they will be hungry. The next second, Mrs. he watched Chang Xiao's mouth move. Drink it, the young master is drinking milk. The second update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 167. This sudden change shocked everyone. Mrs. Li hurried forward and felt reassured when she saw her son's mouth moving. Ms. He, you can stay, said Li. This casual sentence sounded like the sound of nature to Madame He's ears. This was the only good news she had heard since her husband's death. But she turned around and glanced at her daughter, who was still sleeping peacefully in someone else's arms. Madam, I don't need any wages, I just hope you can let my daughter take you with you, Mrs. He said and knelt down. Listening to Mrs. He's cry, the old lady beside Li couldn't help but said, Ms. He, I remember that you have a mother-in-law at home, your husband also has brothers, and there are people in your own family. Our Sun family has well-behaved people generally won't agree to this kind of thing. When Madame He heard this, her eyes darkened. My home, it's not very convenient at home. Listening to Mrs. He's stuttering words, Mrs. Li frowned slightly and asked, what's the problem with you? You might as well just tell me. Niu also said at the side, and he, I'm good at humming my wife. You can tell me directly if you encounter any trouble. Mrs. He was a little afraid of Mrs. Li after all, Mrs. Li's gentleness was only for the children. In the eyes of the servants in the house and people outside, Mrs. Li was a most stern matron. During this time, when she told everyone about her difficulties, she only received ridicule. The only kindness I got was from Naiyuniu. Hearing Naiyuniu's words at this time, Mrs. He plucked up the courage and said, I really have no choice. There is no one else in the family who can help me take care of the child. Neither my mother-in-law nor my mother-in-law's family are willing to help take care of the child. Seeing Mrs. He's appearance, Ms. Li seemed to have encountered a huge difficulty. She spoke softly and asked, why are your husband's family and your mother's family unwilling to help you take care of your children? Mrs. He's tears fell and she said, my mother-in-law dislikes that the child is a girl and wants to sell the child so that she can get the money to find a wife for my brother-in-law. My mother's family and my husband's family are planning to ask me to remarry so that each can get a share of the betrothal gift. My husband and I have a deep relationship and I don't want to remarry. I just want to live a good life with my daughter. Everyone present was greatly shocked when they heard these words. Although Li was born into a wealthy family, she was not aloof from the world. As a woman, she could understand women's difficulties better than others. Li was about to agree, but the old woman beside her suddenly said, you are taking your daughter in the mansion, do you have enough milk for 2 children? How much energy can you use to take care of 2 children at the same time, on the young master? Madam, you can't delay the young master just because she's pitiful. Madam, he said without thinking, of course my daughter doesn't dare to compete with the young master. She is already 4 months old and can be fed by drinking some rice soup. She is very well behaved and does not need extra care. I will treat the young master as Lord, please have mercy on me. Perhaps because of being both mothers, Ms. Li is now more able to sympathize with the pain of others and said, you can stay with your daughter. If you have extra milk, I can also take care of your daughter. The old grandma was devoted to the Lord. After hearing this, she wanted to give a few more words of advice. But Ms. Li waved her hand and said, with such a young child, if I don't care anymore, will I really watch their mother and daughter die? That's all, just think of it as a blessing for my son. Madam, he banged her head heavily on the ground, Madam, I can't repay you for your great kindness, even if I'm just a bully, I will do my best to take good care of the young master. Although Ms. Li is kind-hearted, she is not the kind that has no bottom line. Mrs. He is not the only one taking care of Xiao Changshao. She can easily learn from others how Mrs. He takes care of her children. But the most important reason that prompted her to do this was actually Niu Niu. Mrs. Li could vaguely sense the difference in Niu Niu. Niu Niu liked Madame He, and people who could be valued by her daughter were probably not bad people. Even if this person cannot take good care of Changshao in the end, at worst, he will change his son to a nanny and still take care of Mrs. He, just to make his daughter happy. Fortunately, Mrs. He is really good at taking care of children, and her daughter is also very well behaved. The 4-month-old baby seems to be aware of his situation. Even if he is hungry, he will only hum and rarely cry. Niu Niu's favorite thing to do when she was a guest at the Sun family was not to be taken out shopping by Sun Jiaxing, but to see Xiao Changshao. The 2-month-old baby also likes his sister Niu Niu the most. Every time he cries, he will stop immediately as long as Niu Niu appears and holds his hand. Mrs. Li couldn't help but joked, "Niu Niu, if we had known today, your father and I should not have recognized you as our daughter. We should have asked you to snatch her back as our daughter-in-law." Of course this was a joke. But the kid took it seriously. Niu Niu said with a serious face, "Godmother, Xiao Changshao likes me because he likes my sister, not because he likes me as his wife. We are destined siblings." "You little guy, you have the same principles," Li said with a smile. Niu Niu still had a serious face. "I didn't talk nonsense, I told the truth. I don't have a sister in my life, I have a brother and a younger brother and sister." Although Mr. Li had a son, people at that time believed that more children would bring happiness. The more children, the better. When he heard this, he couldn't help but think about it and asked, "What about your sister? I gave birth to you, or will another mother give birth to you?" Niu Niu raised her little face, and after thinking very seriously for a moment, she shook her head and said, "I don't know yet, but I believe I will have a sister." Sun Jiaxing gently scratched Niu Niu's little nose and said, okay, we Niu Niu will do what we say, and there will definitely be a sister who will pull Niu Niu to buy sweets. Don't be upset when the time comes. I'm not a stingy person. I am the best sister to my younger brothers and sisters, and also the best sister to my brothers," Niu Niu said confidently with her hands on her waist. Li and Sun Jiaxing burst into tears looking at Niu Niu's cute appearance. "I am not as tall as an adult, but I am quite good at speaking." Niu Niu said, "I didn't lie, what I said is the truth. You will know when my brothers and sisters grow up." The couple nodded as if coaxing a child, and said together, yes, what my dear baby said is right." The family of 4 was enjoying themselves happily, when suddenly an old woman with meticulous clothes and hair walked in. "Sir, the old lady invites you and your wife to come over." When Sun Jiaxing heard this, he didn't think anything was wrong. On the other hand, Mrs. Li, when she heard this, the handkerchief in her hand instantly became a mess. First update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 168. Niu Niu didn't notice the undercurrent between the adults. She held her brother's white and tender little hand and whispered, "Godfather and godmother go to find your grandma, and your sister will accompany you." Sun Jiaxing on the other end suddenly said, "Take Niu Niu with you. Niu Niu has been here for so long, but she has never had the chance to see her grandma. It's rare that my mother is still in good health today, so she should go to see her." Li frowned slightly, but didn't pour cold water on her. Niu Niu asked, "Don't you take Changshao with you?" "My dear, Changshao is still too young to go out and see the wind casually," Li explained. "Then how can Changshao see grandma?" Niu Niu asked curiously. "Your grandma is not in good health, and she only saw her once on Changshao's full moon day," Sun Jiaxing said. Niu Niu frowned slightly and said, "It's hard to cultivate feelings if we don't meet often." My grandma and I are often together, so she loves me the most. Li's eyes darkened. Sun Jiaxing laughed and said, "Silly child, that's your long-lived grandmother. Blood is thicker than water. You don't need to work hard to have a deep relationship." Nayunio nodded, not quite understanding, and asked, "Should I change my clothes? My mother taught me that I should dress decently when meeting elders, so that they will be happy." "Oh, Nayunio knows a lot, but you don't need to dress well when meeting your own elders, just casual clothes will do," Sun Jiaxing said with a smile. The couple took Nayunio to the old lady's yard. In Sun Jiaxing's eyes, his mother was a kind woman. Except for doting on her youngest son, she had almost no shortcomings. The man was rough-hearted, and he didn't notice that his wife didn't smile all the way. Sun Jiaxing still chattered about his mother's goodness. "When you meet your grandmother, you will know. She is a grandmother who loves the younger generation very much. The children of your second uncle and third uncle are all pampered by her," Sun Jiaxing said. The group entered the old lady's yard. As soon as she stepped into the house, Niu Niu smelled a very strong smell of medicine. She wrinkled her nose slightly and felt a little uncomfortable, but she didn't say anything. "Mother, I brought Niu Niu to see you. You don't know how cute Niu Niu is. This child's mouth bulges when she eats." Sun Jiaxing praised old lady Sun to Niu Niu, and he kept praising Niu Niu to his mother. His words were exaggerated, as if Niu Niu was the cutest girl in the world. "But in this room, I'm afraid only Li and he have the same thick filter." Old lady Sun interrupted Sun Jiaxing casually, "Since you are a distinguished guest, you can't send him away." Sun Jiaxing frowned slightly when he heard this term. At the old lady's signal, a servant brought a tray with a pair of roughly made silver bracelets on it. Niu Niu didn't accept the gift. She vaguely realized that the rich and respectable old lady in front of her didn't seem to like her. "Too little?" old lady Sun asked. Niu Niu pursed her lips and shook her head gently. "I heard that your father is a scholar. In the countryside, your background is not bad, but this is Nanlin County, not a small place like your village. You have to follow the rules when doing things. You have to dress decently when meeting your elders. You can't be too petty," old lady Sun said so. After Niu Niu entered the Gu family, she rarely heard such harsh words. Although she was young, she was not unable to understand the sincerity and falsehood. Sun Jiaxing was dumbfounded at this time. He couldn't understand how his mother, who had always been kind and amiable, could say such bad words. "Mother, Niu Niu is still a child. How can you say such things?" Before going out, Niu Niu also said that she wanted to change clothes. "I stopped the child from letting her. If you want to blame someone, blame me," Sun Jiaxing said. Old lady Sun's face darkened and she said, "What kind of magic potion did you feed such a daughter from a country family? You are really greedy for your daughter. You don't want your own niece, but you only want to throw the advantage to outsiders." Sun Jiaxing didn't want to quarrel with his mother in front of the child, and he was also afraid that his mother's words just now would leave a psychological shadow on the little girl. He whispered to his wife, "Take Nayunio back first and comfort the child well." Nayunio shook her head and said, "Uncle Sun, I'm not sad and don't need comfort." Sun Jiaxing paused after hearing this. Nayunio explained, "People also have to talk about fate. If the old lady doesn't like me, then I don't have to like the old lady. I have a good grandmother, so I don't have to be sad because of the elders who don't like me." The 6-year-old girl was so open-minded that Sun Jiaxing really didn't know what to say. Such a sensible and well-behaved child, but old lady Sun couldn't like her at all. At this time, she even sneered and said, "No rules." When Li heard this, she couldn't help but protect her daughter behind her. But Niu Niu stepped forward, raised her little head, and said, "Old lady, you don't like me. Who would like you, a child with no rules? Who allowed you to talk to the elders like this, Old lady Sun said angrily. Niu Niu was not affected by these words at all, but said confidently, my parents, godfather and godmother, grandparents, Aunt Lu, 2 brothers, and my brother Chang Xiao, they all like me the most. No matter how much you say, you can't turn me into a nasty child. I am a likable child, I know it myself. Old lady Sun has never met such a child, whose self-confidence is so strong that it is dazzling. She didn't know that Niuniu's current temperament was the result of the Gu family's pampering for a year. She was vaguely thinking that she was too sick and couldn't even bully a little girl. Although she couldn't argue with Niuniu, old lady Sun felt that she could still subdue her son. Big brother, look at you, you treat this unruly child as a treasure. Let her make you angry. This time, Sun Jiaxing didn't do as she wished, but asked back with an ugly face, Mom, Niuniu has no manners. She doesn't make noises, and has never broken your things. After seeing you, she is even more polite and courteous. Is it because the ones in the second and third brothers' families, like them, want to overturn the roof every time they come, that they are considered to be well behaved? Sun Jiaxing's words were reasonable, but his grandchildren were cute in the eyes of old lady Sun even if they really smashed the house to pieces. Those are your own nephews and nieces, and you actually compare them with a wild girl from the countryside. Old lady Sun even blamed Sun Jiaxing in return. Sun Jiaxing said, this is my goddaughter. I treat her as my own daughter, not a wild girl. Old lady Sun covered her chest and said, big brother, you have grown wings and don't listen to your mother. I really raised you in vain. The second update. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 169. MRS Sun has often used this trick to control her son in the past, and she has almost always succeeded. But today it suddenly failed. Sun Jiaxing suddenly felt that his mother was so strange, and she was no longer the knowledgeable and sensible person he remembered. Sun Jiaxing said, Mom, don't pretend to be sick. You hate Niu Niu not because there is anything wrong with Niu Niu, but because she is someone else's child, not the second and third brother's child, right? Old MRS Sun was still tough, I just don't like unruly children. You, my goddaughter, are not cute at all. Sun Jiaxing looked at her with shocked eyes and said, it's okay if you say you don't like her, why are you still telling lies with your eyes open? She is so cute, just like Swichuan, and cuter than the 2 nieces of the third brother's family. I don't know how many times. MRS Sun was heartbroken when her son stared at her with a look like are you blind? To be honest, if there is no conflict of interest, Niuniu is not his son's goddaughter, but just a friend's daughter who is here as a guest. The old lady will feel very happy when she sees such a beautiful and lovely little girl. However, this child has already received a lot of benefits by virtue of her status as goddaughter. Not counting the gold objects and various gifts given to her, just the fact that she got a house in Guanglin Mansion is enough to make MRS Sun uncomfortable. My 2 biological granddaughters are the cutest to me. Boss, please turn your elbows outward. Old MRS Sun still refused to change her words, and even said, don't let this child touch me. I see it's annoying. Li's first reaction was to cover Niu Niu's ears, fearing that the little girl would be embarrassed when she heard such repulsive words. After Niu Niu's ears were suddenly covered, she looked up at Mr. Li, with her big watery eyes open, and said crisply, I heard it, I think it's okay. The old lady doesn't want me to stay here, and I don't want to be with her yet. Stay tuned. She turned her head and said to old MRS Sun, I am not some wild girl, I have many family members, and my father is not a poor scholar, he is a scholar, he is rich. Although you don't like me and I don't like you very much, I like Daddy Sunday. You are Daddy Sun's mother. Daddy Sun is very filial to you, so I wish you a long life. After Niu Niu said this, she pulled Mrs. Li's hand. Mrs. Li didn't dare to look at her mother-in-law's face and immediately took her out. After leaving the old lady's yard, Mrs. Li breathed a long sigh of relief. Godmother, is the old lady treating you badly? Niu Niu suddenly asked. Mrs. Li was stunned when she heard this. She pushed the servants around her away and said, "You are still young and don't understand things between adults." Niu Niu sighed like an adult and said, "You adults always like to say this kind of thing, but children also have brains. I have eyes and can see." Li asked, "Xiao is so powerful, what did you see?" Niu Niu sighed like an adult and said, "The old lady doesn't like Daddy Sun much, so how can she be so nice to you?" Mrs. Li was stunned when she heard this. Her husband was indeed not her mother-in-law's favorite son. Everyone in the family could see this, except her husband. Now even Niu Niu, who has just arrived at this house, can see it. "Your eyes are so sharp," Li asked softly. Niu Niu puffed up her belly proudly and said, "Of course, Godmother, I have already said that children actually know a lot. The old lady's eyes when she looked at Daddy Sun were not loving at all. It didn't look like she was looking at her biological son. It's like watching." Niu Niu tilted her head and tried hard to think of how to describe it. Her brows knitted together before she found the words, "It's like looking at a tool that can be taken advantage of." Mrs. Li only thought that this description was extremely subtle. When the old lady looked at her eldest son, she just thought he was useful and could take care of the other two useless sons. "Your father was raised at the knees of his grandmother since he was a child. When he was older, he was sent to an outer courtyard. He was strictly raised by your late grandfather. He had little contact with the old lady. It was inevitable that mother and son were alienated," Li explained. Niu Niu shook her head and said, "My grandma from the Gu family also feels that she is not close to my father, but she loves my father the most and favors me the most. My father is the pride of my grandparents. My grandma's least favorite son is actually her uncle. She is most impatient to see her uncle drinking, and she also doesn't like the few friends her uncle knows who love drinking. But every time his friends come to the house, grandma never gives him anything. Uncle is embarrassed." Because she felt that she could not let her son lose face in front of his friends. "Although grandma's son is speaking ill of me, she is actually trying to embarrass Daddy Sunday. How much does she dislike Daddy Sun? When a child faces someone he trusts, he pours out everything like beans from a bamboo tube." When Mrs. Li heard this, she couldn't help but feel sad and shed tears. The husband is a man, and he won the election early. Even if the old lady is partial, she still has to rely on her most promising son to not embarrass him. She is a daughter-in-law, and she stays in the inner house every day. She has not had children for many years, so she has received many lessons from her mother-in-law. She always thought it was her fault that she couldn't have children, but now it seems that it was actually because of her husband. Niu Niu was vaguely aware of Li's emotions, and slowly snuggled into her arms, comforting her. "Godmother, are you feeling uncomfortable somewhere?" Li's tears fell slowly and hit the back of Niu Niu's hand. Niu Niu quickly took out the handkerchief and wiped her tears gently. Don't cry, Godmother is the best." Niu Niu comforted her with a sweet voice. Sun Jiaxing in the room looked very unhappy, and said to the unreasonable old mother, "Niu Niu is so good, even if it has become like this, she still wishes you a long life." Old lady Sun curled her lips and said, "Who knows whether she is sincere or not? She is only 6 years old, how could she lie?" Old lady Sun still wanted to confront her son. "I just don't like this child, I feel annoyed when I see her, maybe it's because she is in conflict with me, she is unlucky for me. Don't recognize this goddaughter, take back the house you gave her." Sun Jiaxing suddenly felt that the crux was here, and asked coldly, who should I give it to after it is returned? Old lady son said, who else can I give it to? When your father divided the family, he treated your second and third brothers unfairly. They have many children, and you should give them more subsidies. Sun Jiaxing looked at him steadily and asked, do you want me to give each of my nephews and nieces a house? Old lady Sun's eyes lit up, but the weight of her grandson and granddaughter in her heart was also different. What's the point of giving it to girls? They'll get married in the future, so give the houses to your nephews. They'll need money for everything when they get married and have children. Listening to what old lady Sun said, Sun Jiaxing asked, Mom, can I give them all the houses and fields under my name? First update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 170. Old MR's son may have been confused because she didn't notice that Sun Jiaxing looked wrong. Instead, she said excitedly, are you willing to separate? That's right. You have already won the Jinchi. Unlike your second and third brothers who have no future, more it would be nice to give them some money. Sun Jiaxing asked, you are worried about your second and third brothers, your nephews and nieces, but what about longevity? MR's son didn't even like Sun Jiaxing, her biological son, much, so how much could she care about Chang Xiao, her grandson? Chang Xiao already has a lot. Didn't your wife bring a large dowry? They are all cousins. We can't let his cousins be too much worse than him. Perhaps because she was so dizzy from illness, MR's son unknowingly spoke her true words. You are not afraid that they will have a bad life, but you are afraid that your longevity will be better than theirs, Sun Jiaxing said with a cold face. Old MR's son said, they can't bear the hardship of studying. In the future, this family will be supported by you and Chang Xiao. How can the person in charge of the family not suffer some losses? Sun Jiaxing has always been very tolerant to his brothers. First, because MR's son always talked about it and was kidnapped by morality and believed that he owed his brothers a lot. Second, he had no children of his own in the past, so he didn't care about many things. But now that he has his own child, too many things have happened in the past few days since Niu entered the house. Sun Jiaxing took a deep breath and said, do you know what the second and third younger siblings did? Even though old MR's son was ill, she still had a firm grasp on the inner house. She naturally knew what was going on ahead. It's just the words of the maids, and it may not really be what they think. Even if it is true, it's just the calculation of the women in the back house. It has nothing to do with your two brothers. You can't let this matter ruin your brotherhood. Listening to MR's son's words, Sun Jiaxing suddenly felt that this was indeed the case. Mom, you don't even ask how longevity is, and you don't care if he has been tortured, Sun Jiaxing asked. Old MR's son said matter-of-factly, if there is really something wrong with longevity, how could you and your wife be so nervous without inviting a doctor into the house? Is this why you are indifferent to him? Your direct grandmother doesn't even care if the child is frightened, Sun Jiaxing asked. But MR's son was still full of nonsense. Isn't it okay? It's not a bad thing if the child is frightened. On the contrary, it will make him stronger. Sun Jiaxing smiled bitterly and asked, Mom, my eldest nephew was frightened to tears in the ancestral house when he was 6 years old. You invited the doctor to the house overnight. Why didn't you say that you should scare him at that time? MR's son was immediately speechless. Every birthday of my second and third brothers, you remember clearly. What about mine? I haven't heard you say a birthday blessing for how many years, Sun Jiaxing said. Old MR's son opened her mouth slightly, are you blaming me? My son doesn't dare, but my son is also a human being, and my son will be tired too, Sun Jiaxing said tiredly. Old MR's son felt that today's eldest son was particularly unreasonable. You are the eldest son and you have to support the family. When your father split up the family, he also gave you most of the family property. You have got enough, what else do you have? Satisfy. Sun Jiaxing couldn't help but laugh and said, just because I get more of the family property, that's why you keep grudges. Old MR's son said, we are all brothers from the same mother, but your father insists on separating the family like this, which makes your two brothers feel uncomfortable. I do this for your own good and to avoid discord between the brothers. Sun Jiaxing smiled bitterly, when we divide the family property, we should divide it equally. If something goes wrong, I, the eldest brother, will have to clean up the mess. Do I think my fate should be lower than theirs? MR's son only muttered that elder brother is like father. When Sun Jiaxing heard this, his face became even more resentful. If I really had the authority like a father, you wouldn't stop me from teaching them. MR's son. Old MR's son was a doting mother. Whenever the second and third children caused trouble and Sun Jiaxing wanted to teach him a lesson, she would stop him desperately. As the filter on his mother shattered, Sun Jiaxing remembered more and more details, and his thoughts had never been so clear as at this moment. You said you didn't like Niu Niu, but I still remember that I didn't like those little friends from the second and third sons, but you didn't allow me to show off to them because you were afraid of hurting their face. It turns out that you know better than anyone else how to protect your son's face. Niu Niu is the guest I brought back. Why are you not afraid of hurting my face by treating her like this? Sun Jiaxing pressed her every question, and the old lady's son was defeated step by step. I'm just sick and confused. MR's son explained stutteringly. Sun Jiaxing shook his head and said, I don't need any explanation from you, just say whatever you want. You have been in poor health, and the doctors in the county have limited medical skills. I will still send you to Beijing, but the second and third brothers, my conduct is bad. If I mess with noble people when I go to Beijing, I won't be able to end it, so I might as well stay in my hometown. Old MR's son was indeed ill, but it was only a minor illness. Most of the time, she pretended to be ill and took advantage of Sun Jiaxing. Seeing that Sun Jiaxing wanted to completely ignore his two younger brothers, the old lady couldn't bear it. She said, we are all one family, how can we let them stay in the county? They still have to rely on you as their elder brother to discipline them. Can I discipline them? You are afraid that if I am not in the county, there will be no one to clean up their mess, Sun Jiaxing said. MR's son didn't speak. Sun Jiaxing was now disheartened and hardened his heart to his mother, I have made up my mind. You are not in good health, so don't worry about these things. Just take a good rest. After that, Sun Jiaxing stood up and left despite the old lady's obstruction. When he left the yard, Sun Jiaxing saw his wife holding their daughter and crying not far away. Sun Jiaxing. Aing, what's wrong with you? Sun Jiaxing stepped forward and rescued the daughter from his wife's arms. When Li saw him, she cried even harder, with a bit of resentment in her eyes. Sun Jiaxing was completely confused and asked stupidly, who gave you this injustice? Li didn't answer, but her tears never stopped. Sun Jiaxing could only look at Niu Niu helplessly. Niu Niu looked at Li with heartache and said, Godmother, you don't say anything, how can Godfather know your grievances? Even if I say it, he won't be on my side, Li cried even harder after saying that. Niu Niu said, if he doesn't side with you, I will side with you. Li hugged Niu Niu again and said, good child, you still know how to care for others. Niu Niu said again, but if you don't tell me how you were wronged, I don't know how to side with you. Even if your godfather doesn't understand your grievances, at least you will feel better. Second update.